My father cheated on his wife with my mother. When she became pregnant, he hinted at an abortion, but she refused. I was 5 years old. My mother found a husband who was categorically against me. One autumn day, my mother got me out of bed, dressed me, gave me a backpack, put me in the car, and took me to my granny for the weekend. When she left, she said, "You understand me too. I've been alone all my life." I, being small, did not understand the meaning of these words. I only saw my grandmother with tears in her eyes. Out of childish naivety, I began to say that my mother would come for me on Sunday. But she didn't come back. She left me. When I was 10, my grandmother took to her bed. Fearing that they might take me to an orphanage, I called my father and asked him to pick me up. He agreed with difficulty. His wife turned out to be a good woman. She gladly accepted me, and with 2 older brothers, 14 years old, I made friends right there. I soon began to call my stepmother mother. A year later, my father filed for divorce and left for a young secretary. Mom fought for me in court, but I stayed with my father, who threw me at my grandmother. Mom always came. In the end, she decided to help us. We sold my grandmother's apartment and bought a small cottage in a nice village, with the help of my mother, of course. The brothers were close by. Everyone was nearby. At 20, I met a wonderful young man, and we began a relationship. They ended when, after 3 years, when I returned from work, I found him with a colleague in one underwear. She kicked him out on the street and forbade him to even approach me. A month later she found out about the pregnancy. By that time, I had my own house, the same small cottage, because my grandmother went to live with my sister, and I decided to give birth. I told my mom and she agreed with my decision. A son was born. The former was terribly glad of this news, constantly called, came. I was not against his communication with the child, and even allowed me to sometimes pick him up for the weekend. After 4 years, a work colleague began to take care of me. A stormy romance began. The case ended in a wedding. We started living in my house. But then I began to notice that my husband always finds fault with his son. Either the son folded the toys in the wrong place, or the shoes were placed inaccurately. I made a remark to my husband and asked him not to find fault. My whole life collapsed when I arrived home and heard sobs and slaps. My beloved husband used a belt to beat my 10-year-old son, who was lying on the floor and covering his face with his hands. The husband yelled, "Once again I will see how you hug the boy, you will fly out in an instant, do you understand? No mother will help you. You raised a motherfucker." Seeing me, he turned white all over, moved away from his son. It's like an animal has awakened in me. I flew up to him, snatched the belt from him, and began to bludgeon him with all my might. I screamed for him to get out immediately, that I hate him. Then he shouted to me, "Choose. Or he or I." He. Only he. I would not change my son in my life. I shouted in response. "And your mother fucked you, slut, and did the right thing," he said. I fell into a stupor and yelled for him to get out of my house immediately. When he went out the threshold, I flew up to my son. He was shaking all over. I started to calm down and ask what happened. It turned out that the son was returning from school with a friend. They reached our house and hugged each other in a friendly way. When the son came home, his stepfather grabbed him, threw him on the floor and started yelling that he was a fag and he would not tolerate fag in his house. We divorced quickly. He got nothing because everything in the house was mine. Mom and brothers were shocked by this. Now I'm alone. No, I'm not afraid of loneliness. I have 2 wonderful brothers, a mother, a grandmother with whom I see each other, albeit not often, a son. I am absolutely happy.